It's going to be good until it's not.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless lakes of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
I'll start by shilling, like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Let's move on. The RTS genre is an interesting one. The one saw the highest of peaks, and now seems to be in the lowest of slums, with only Total War still going strong, sometimes, when other games in the genre are, well, the least said, the better. Yeah, before we can get into the topic of this video, Dawn of War, of course, let's go through a little history lesson, because I consider history to be one of the pillars when it comes to understanding a certain topic. It's important. When exactly the first RTS was released is a good guess, and it's a guess many people have tried to make and have tried to find the answer to it for a long time. Some say it was Utopia in 81, others say that it was Citron Masters in 82, Stonkers in 83, or Bokotsuka Wars in 83 as well. And if we are to believe IGN, it was Herzog Zwei in 89. Nevertheless, there wasn't much for the genre at the time, and it sure didn't look like the genre we know today. For the genre and the games that we now have today, we have to thank two studios, Westwood Studios and, oh boy, Blizzard Entertainment, both of which released games between 92 and 98. But the first between these two was Westwood Studios with Dune 2, The Building of a Dynasty. After this we got Warcraft Orcs and Humans, Command & Conquer Red Alert, followed by Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, Age of Empires, Total Annihilation. You get it. In that period we got a bunch of good RTS games that would later on evolve into something better. The following period after that would see games use the same formula but try to make it bigger. There wasn't that much innovation back then. Games would bring in more units, more maps, or larger maps, maybe even giving them a little gimmick, but nothing that big. Of course, all games started to move towards 3D animation during that time, and so too did the genre, and was there that many rise and fall, because not every game and company could make the jump into 3D work. There was always complaints about the camera not working, units looking wanky. A few games managed to do it, Age of Mythology and Warcraft 3 being some, but still, it was an interesting innovation to a genre that felt stale at the time. Remember, this was around the 2003 period. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Because we are moving to the period starting from 2004 and until our present day. This was and is the age of innovation, where companies try to find their most unique features to sell to their customers, be it a mix of RTS and FPS, dual layered maps, things like we see in Total War, and so on. Until 2009, every company tried to be creative. And here we find our protagonist for this video, Dawn of War, who was the first game to give up on resource collection and focus on strategic points that allocate resources. It would also use a squad system instead of the regular individual units. But let's be honest, it wasn't the first to do that, no. That honor goes to the game Ground Control, released in 2000 by Massive Entertainment, the guys behind World in Conflict and the Division series. But that is a story for someone else to tell. We are here for Dawn of War. And let's get into Dawn of War's history. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War was developed by Relic Entertainment, a Canadian video game developer, the only good thing to come out of Canada for a while, known for their work on the Company of Heroes series and the Homeworld franchise. The game was published by THQ and was released on the September 20th of 2004 for Microsoft Windows. The game was initially announced in March of 2004, and the development team worked tirelessly to create a game that captured the essence of the Warhammer 40k universe. The game was built using the Essence engine, a proprietary game engine created by Relic Entertainment themselves. The development team was led by game director Jay Wilson and lead designer Mike Lee, who had previously worked on the popular real-time strategy game Homeworld. The team also included several other veteran developers, including lead programmer Andrew McNabb and lead artist Kevin McMullen. Dawn of War was praised for its innovative gameplay mechanics, including the use of a cover and suppression system, as well as its immersive storyline and attention to details in the Warhammer 40k universe. The game's single-player campaign received particular acclaim for its engaging story and challenging missions, some more than others. Upon release, Dawn of War was met with critical and commercial success. It received numerous awards, including Best PC Game of 2004 from GameSpy and GameSpot, and was nominated for several others, including Game of the Year from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. The game's success led to several expansions that are the following: Winter Assault, Dark Crusade, and Soulstorm, as well as a sequel, Dawn of War 2, and another game we won't be touching upon until much later on. In addition to its critical and commercial success, Dawn of War also helped to raise the profile of the Warhammer 40k universe in the video game industry. The game's success paved the way for other Warhammer 40k video games that are included, but of course are not limited to Space Marine, Gladius, Mechanicus, and as we all know, many others. One of Dawn of War's aspects is the gameplay. Of course, it's a game, that makes sense. And that gameplay made many people fall in love with the original game and its expansions. Because, well, it's a masterpiece of its own, and here's why. Dawn of War's gameplay is typical for a traditional RTS, with players building bases, gathering resources, and constructing armies to defeat their enemies. The game is played across a series of maps, each of which has its own terrain and objectives. The gameplay mechanics are intuitive and easy to grasp at first, making it accessible for both casual and experienced players. One of the standout features of Dawn of War is the way it encourages aggressive gameplay. The game's resource system is based around capturing strategic points scattered throughout the map, which means players must constantly push forward and engage with their opponent to gain control of these points. This leads to a fast-paced, dynamic gameplay, with battles often occurring all over the map simultaneously, but sometimes only in one spot. Another unique feature of Dawn of War is the way it handles unit morale. As units, or squads, take damage or witness their comrades falling in battle, their morale will begin to degrade. This can cause them to panic, flee, or even turn on their own side. I'm just joking, they just run away. Managing your troops' morale is crucial to success in the game and adds an extra layer of strategy to battles. One of the best things about Dawn of War is attention to detail. The game's graphics are impressive for its time, with detailed unit models and environments that bring the Warhammer 40k universe to life. The sound design during the battle is also excellent, with each faction having its own distinct voice acting and music. The game's faction balance is also well done. Each faction has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, and players must learn how to use their faction's strengths while mitigating their weaknesses. This leads to a deep and rewarding gameplay experience, as players discover new strategies and tactics as they play. One of the strongest aspects of Dawn of War is the variety of factions available to play. Each faction has its own unique playstyle, units, and mechanics, providing players with a lot of options and variety in their gameplay. The Space Marines are a well-rounded faction with strong infantry and vehicles, while the Eldar are more focused on speed and maneuverability. The Orcs are a horde-like faction with weak individual units or squads, but the ability to quickly produce large numbers of troops, especially if you know how to exploit the game. The Chaos Space Marines are a more aggressive and chaotic factions, with abilities that can disrupt enemy morale and cause panic. Each faction is unique and offers a distinct gameplay experience, making Dawn of War highly replayable. As mentioned before, Dawn of War uses a unique resource system, where players must capture and hold strategic points across the map to generate resources. The more points a player holds, the faster their resource income. This leads to a more dynamic gameplay experience, as players must constantly be on the move and fighting to gain control of these points. Additionally, each faction has their own unique resource systems. Space Marines generate resource from captured strategic points, while the Orcs generate resources by building structures that produce scrap, which they can then use to construct units. Dawn of War's resource management system is another strength of its gameplay. It requires players to constantly be on the move and fighting to capture and hold strategic points to generate resources. This creates a sense of urgency and adds to the dynamic nature of the gameplay. It also encourages players to be more aggressive and take risks, as they need to capture and hold strategic points to generate resources. Yes, I know I've said this a lot. The unique resource system also adds to the game's replayability, as each faction has its own unique ways of generating resources, creating different gameplay experiences depending on which faction is being played at the moment. Base building in Dawn of War is relatively simple compared to other RTS games, but still, it offers enough depth to be satisfying. Each faction has their own unique building options, with different buildings unlocking different units and upgrades. For example, the Space Marines can build a chapel to unlock their more advanced units, while the Eldar can build a webway gate to teleport their troops around the map. Players must also manage their base defenses, placing turrets and sort of walls to protect against enemy attacks. Dawn of War allows for some unit customization, with players able to equip their squads with different weapons and upgrades. For example, the Space Marines can equip their squads with flamers or missile launchers. Of course, we are talking about tactical squads. While the Eldar can give their units different psychic powers. This allows players to tailor their army to their preferred playstyle and strategy. Each unit has its own strengths and weaknesses, and players must learn to use them effectively in battle. This level of depth and customization allows players to experiment and find new strategies and tactics, aiding to the game's replayability. As mentioned earlier, Dawn of War's unit morale system is a unique feature that adds an extra layer of strategy. Units will become demoralized if they take too much damage or witness their comrades falling in battle. This can cause them to panic and flee, making them less effective in combat. However, Players can use abilities and tactics to boost their unit's morale, such as rallying cries or leadership auras. Additionally, certain factions have abilities that can directly target enemy morale, such as the Chaos Space Marine's ability to spread fear and panic among their opponents. Dawn of War's morale system is a unique feature that adds an extra layer of strategy to battles. It encourages players not just focus on brute force, but also on tactics and strategy. The morale system creates a sense of tension and unpredictability in battles, as a squad that is winning can suddenly break and flee if their morale is shattered. This adds, as I said before, a layer of complexity to the game, and it makes it more rewarding to win battles through strategy and tactics, rather than just using overwhelming force. Dawn of War's terrain is not just for show, as it is in other RTS games, but also plays a crucial role in battle. Different types of terrain offer different bonuses and penalties to units. For example, units in cover will take less damage from enemy fire, while units in water will move slower. Players must also navigate obstacles and choke points on the map to gain tactical advantages. Terrain and cover offer different bonuses and penalties to units, adding to the strategic depth of battles. This adds to the realism of battles and makes them more engaging and exciting. The game also offers a variety of victory conditions for players to choose from, such as Annihilation, which means destroying all enemy units, Control Points, which means holding more strategic points than the enemy, and Power Core, destroying the enemy's power core. Self-explanatory. This allows players to tailor their games to their preferred playstyles and keeps matches from becoming repetitive. The strengths of Warhammer 40k Dawn of War's gameplay lie in its faction variety, unit design, morale system, resource management, and terrain with cover mechanics. The attention to details in these aspects of the game creates a deep and engaging gameplay experience that is highly replayable. These strengths make Dawn of War a classic RTS game that is still enjoyable to play today. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows out there. Mostly because there is no perfect game. Not 100%. There are games whose flaws you can look away from, but nevertheless, they are still there and they don't magically disappear. I think it also makes a lot of sense to talk about these flaws in the following segment to better appreciate the game. One of the main criticisms of Dawn of War is in its AI. While the game's campaign mode offers a decent challenge, the AI in the skirmish mode can be quite predictable and easy to exploit. This can lead to repetitive gameplay, makes it less enjoyable for players looking for a challenge against the AI. Another criticism of Dawn of War and its gameplay is that it can become repetitive over time. The gameplay loop of capturing strategic points, building up your base, and engaging in battles is nice and it feels good, but becomes repetitive after several playthroughs. While the different factions do provide some variety in gameplay, the core gameplay mechanics remain the same. And this can make the game feel monotonous and dull for some people. Another issue with Dawn of War's gameplay is its pathfinding system, something that has not been fixed in many games that release today. So, let's begin. Units can sometimes get stuck on terrain or fail to navigate around obstacles, leading to frustrating and sometimes game-breaking situations. This can cause units to be lost unnecessarily sometimes, or leave important areas undefended, which can impact the outcome of many battles and can turn your victories into losses quite easily. While Dawn of War's faction variety is a strength, it can also lead to faction balance issues. Some factions may be stronger or weaker than others, leading to a perceived imbalance in the game. This can make certain factions feel overpowered and others underpowered, and can detract from the overall gameplay experience. Dawn of War's focus on capturing strategic points and generating resources, though is a unique and interesting mechanic, it also means that the game lacks traditional base building elements. Players cannot construct walls of sorts, towers, except turrets, or other defenses that feel more common in other RTS games. This can make them feel, and the bases as well, not only the players, vulnerable and exposed. And this makes the strategic feeling of the game be less interesting and lowered, as players cannot use base building to create more defensible positions. Another problem with Dawn of War's gameplay is its limited unit cap. Players can only build a certain number of units, which can limit strategic options and make battles feel less epic, but more reduced in scale. This can make it difficult to experiment with different unit combinations or tactics, as players are limited by the unit cap. Except if you play as an orc and exploit the game, which works really well. You can get a huge army of boys up there. The game's unit control system can also be a weakness of the gameplay sometimes. Players have limited control over individual units, with only basic commands available such as move, attack, and retreat. This can make battles feel less dynamic and strategic, as players cannot micromanage units in the same way as other RTS games. By the way, this was made by an AI, the whole script for this, because why not, let's test it out. Not that sold on this part. This one doesn't make any sense because it's not how I remember it. Though the other aspects seem true, this one doesn't. Let's skip it. There are certainly many strengths to Warhammer Dawn of War and its gameplay. There are also several weaknesses that can detract from the overall experience. The repetitive gameplay loop, pathfinding issues, balance issues, lack of base building, limited unit cap, and limited unit control are all areas where the game falls short. While these weaknesses may not impact all players, they are worth considering for those who are looking for a more varied and dynamic gameplay experience. Another issue with the game is its lack of variety in game modes. There's only one game mode available in skirmish mode, which can become repetitive after extended play. There's also a lot to say and pick and choose about the game. But, as I said, every game has its own problems. Even if we look away from them, they are still there. Sometimes, those flaws, the flaws of the game, can be overlooked because the good qualities outweigh the bad. But it's not all bad, because we also have some quite entertaining and funny moments, things that I enjoy quite a lot. Of course, Dawn of War has its own fair share of humorous moments, such as the orcs' over-the-top voice acting and antics, which are very orky. The game also features a range of amusing unit responses and sound effects, like the Eldars using hissing like snakes, which is funny knowing their history and relation with Slaanesh. An amusing aspect of the game is the over-the-top animation and special abilities that units possess. Watching a squad of Space Marines use their jetpacks to jump onto a building and unleash a barrage of missiles on an enemy base is an entertaining sight, as is seeing a squad of Eldar use their psychic powers to create a massive explosion that devastates enemy troops. The game's over-the-top and bombastic nature can provide some entertainment value and keep players engaged, because it's fun. With the gameplay out of the way, let's talk about the best aspect of the game, the story. Because for a first timer diving into a Warhammer 40k story, I think it's a pretty good way to get into the universe without investing that much into the tabletop or picking a book that you won't know where to start from. Dawn of War features a deep and engaging story set in the grim darkness of the far future, where humanity is locked in an endless war against countless foes. The game's story revolves around the planet of Tartarus, a world of great strategic importance that is coveted by all of the game's factions. The story begins with an opening cinematic that sets the tone for the game's dark and brutal universe. The narration describes a galaxy torn apart by war, where humanity fights for its very survival against countless enemies, both alien and demonic. The player takes on the role of the Blood Ravens, a chapter of space marines who have been dispatched to Tartarus to investigate a strange energy reading emanating from the planet's surface. As the game progresses, the Blood Ravens discover that a powerful artifact known as the Maledictum is located on the planet, which has the potential to grant immense power to whoever controls it. The game's story unfolds through a series of missions, each of which is designed to push the player's strategic and tactical abilities to their limits. The Blood Ravens must fight against a variety of foes, including orcs, Eldar, Chaos, and... It says here Tyranids, but that doesn't make any sense. No, it's just orcs, Eldars, and Chaos, that's it. All of whom are vying for control of the planet and the power of the Maledictum. Tyranids will become playable only in Dawn of War 2. Throughout the game, the player will encounter a variety of memorable characters, including the enigmatic Eldar seer Maka, the fanatical Chaos sorcerer Sindri Mir, and the mysterious Inquisitor Mordecai. These characters all play a role in the game's story, and their actions and motivations drive the plot forward. As the player progresses through the game, they will uncover the true nature of the Maledictum and the forces that seek to control it. The story is filled with twists and turns, with each new revelation building upon the last, leading to a climactic final battle that will determine the fate of Tartarus and the galaxy itself. One of the strengths of Dawn of War's story is its focus on the lore and mythology of the Warhammer 40k universe. The game's setting is rich in history and detail, and the story makes frequent references to the wider universe, such as the Emperor of Mankind, the Chaos Gods, and the various factions that make up the game's universe. I apologize, but this doesn't do it justice. This doesn't tell you anything about the story. Like, the script is at this point 50-50 me, 50-50 the AI. Technically 50-50. You know what? Screw this. Rewind time. The single-player campaign is set on the planet of Tartarus, an imperial planet that is currently being besieged by a large orc invasion. The campaign begins with Colonel Brom and his 37th Tartarus Planetary Defense Force Regiment under attack by a large group of orcs. The Blood Ravens' 3rd Company, led by Captain Gabriel Angelos, arrive on the planet and save Brom and his remaining men, who then proceed to exterminate the remaining orcs in the vicinity. In the aftermath of the battle, Gabriel is joined by the librarian Isidore Achios. Brom asks Isidore about the recent sterilization of the planet Cyrene. However, Isidore makes it clear he is not to bring it up again, particularly not in Angelos' presence. The Blood Ravens then prepare to attack the orcs surrounding the port in order to protect the evacuation craft. Isidore, sensing that the captain's mind is troubled, realizes why and tells him that there was nothing he could have done to save his home planet of Cyrene. However, Gabriel tells him not to mention it again, stating that his homeworld was his responsibility. After the extermination of the orcs, scouts reveal to Gabriel that Chaos forces are operating on the planet. Soon after this, they are joined by an inquisitor, Mordecai Thoth, who ordered them to leave the planet, warning that a warp storm is approaching the planet and it will consume it in 3 days' time. Thoth orders a complete evacuation of the planet, but Gabriel refuses, stating his desire to investigate the possible threat of chaos. Thoth then implies that Gabriel's actions on Cyrene have clouded his judgment, making him see chaos where it doesn't exist. Funny, coming from an Inquisitor. On further investigation, it is revealed that the Eldar are also operating on the planet. The Blood Ravens find an altar dedicated to chaos, confirming Gabriel's suspicions, and resolves to destroy the traitors. Gabriel resolves to destroy the traitors, and knowing that Isadar is already under the influence of Sindir Mir, the Chaos Sorcerer of the Alpha Legion. The Blood Ravens pursue the Eldar to the abandoned city of Lovremar and engage them in a full-scale battle across the city. Upon the destruction of most of the remaining Eldar by Gabriel's forces, their leader, Farseer Maka, pleads with Gabriel to heed her words. However, during their moment of distraction, Sindri steals an artifact, which Maka reveals to be the key to the undoing of this world. When Gabriel tries to inquire for more information, the Farseer shows surprise at his ignorance, commenting that the Inquisitor keeps them on a short leash, which, let's be honest, they're Eldar. They don't give information that openly. Maka implies that Thoth knows more than he is telling, and advises Gabriel and Isador to ask him, before telling the Blood Ravens where to find the entrenched Chaos forces, stating that thanks to the Space Marines, the Eldar are too weak to confront them. After a pitched battle with the forces of the Alpha Legion, including traitorous Imperial Guard regiments who have been corrupted by chaos, Gabriel and Isador confront Thoth in the ruins of an Imperial temple. He reveals that the world is cursed and bears an artifact of chaos, the Maledictum, a stone that contains the essence of a demon. The forces of chaos now bear all that they need to unearth it. Thoth explains that the Eldar were fighting to protect the stone, as it was they who imprisoned the demon in the stone originally. Thoth comments that as Chaos's oldest enemy, the Eldar see themselves as the only capable defense against its influence, and we have paid for their arrogance. Thoth also says that the power of the Maledictum is enough to turn the faithful and drive men mad, having already corrupted much of the population of Tartarus and the Imperial Guard, as well as affecting the Blood Ravens somehow. Thoth explains his insistence the Blood Ravens depart was to protect them from being trapped on the planet with the demon by the coming warp storm. Gabriel and Thoth form an alliance of sorts and make plans to find and destroy the Maledictum. However, Isador is completely overcome by the temptations of Sindri and Chaos, and resolves to steal the Maledictum for himself. While the Blood Ravens and the remaining loyal guardsmen are busy exterminating the army of Lord Baal, Isador seizes his chance and steals the Maledictum. Inquisitor Thoth then reveals that he had known that Chaos was corrupting one of the Space Marine commanders, but he has suspected Gabriel, and they had paid the price for his error. In the face of Isador's betrayal, Gabriel pursues him in an effort to bring him to justice. The Blood Raven forces are successful in destroying Isador's troops, and Gabriel challenges Isador to a duel. Isador holds the upper hand at first, taunting Gabriel about his weakness and guilt over what he did to Cyrene. But Gabriel finally lets go of his guilt, replying that he did the right thing to stop the taint on Cyrene spreading further. Goaded to fight back, Gabriel eventually defeats Isidore. Beaten, the librarian pleads with Gabriel for forgiveness and a chance to redeem himself. Gabriel tells him, "If redemption is what you seek, then that is what I will give you," before shooting him in the head with his bolt pistol, using him as an example to his men about the dangers of chaos. Meanwhile, Sindri had attempted to use the power of the Maledictum for his own ends, transforming himself into a demon prince with the stone's power. Inquisitor Thoth bequeaths the demon hammer, God Splinter, to Gabriel since he feels that it is Gabriel that will end this battle and not him. They then, with the Blood Ravens and the aid of the remaining Eldar forces of Farseer Maka, attack the Chaos forces, eventually killing Sindri. The final scene sees the Eldar and the Blood Ravens standing around the Maledictum. Despite the warnings of Farseer Maka, who begs them not to destroy the stone, Gabriel obeys Inquisitor Thoth and his own judgment, and destroys the Maledictum with God Splinter. The Eldar forces then retreat after Maka prophetically warns Gabriel that he has doomed them all. Inquisitor Thoth and the Blood Ravens leave to be evacuated. However, Gabriel stays behind and encounters the Demon of Khorne, which she unwittingly released from the Maledictum. The demon let Gabriel and his men leave safely as thanks for its release, but not before informing Gabriel that the planet was actually an altar to the blood god Khorne. In fact, the orc invasion had been prearranged by Sindri, who sought the release of the demon of Khorne through the spilling of blood upon the planet. Every death had been a sacrifice towards the demon's release, in which Gabriel's contributions were many and magnificent. The demon acknowledges that if he had been released much earlier, he would have been much easier to destroy. The demon then tells Gabriel to flee, and to know that soon he would come to claim them all. Gabriel then vows to destroy the demon, before following after his departing men. As you can see, the story is pretty complex and fitting for the grim darkness of the 31st millennium. It has a cast of, should I say, interesting characters that develop along the story, and it has a character arc for Gabriel Angelos, the protagonist of the game. Something that makes the story much more enjoyable than in other RTSs, though some, like Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, Warcraft 3, and I think Spellforce, do prove to work pretty well when it comes to character arcs and development in the story. But with that out of the way, let's look at the graphics and the sound of when it comes to Dawn of War. Don't worry, there won't be much to say here, but there are still some interesting things to talk about. Dawn of War's graphics were impressive for their time, featuring highly detailed unit models, environments, and special effects. The game's art style was faithful to the 40k universe, with gritty, dystopian landscapes and dark, imposing architecture. The attention to detail in the unit models was particularly impressive, with each faction having unique and distinct visual designs. The game's animations were also well done, with units moving and attacking in a realistic manner that is also satisfying. One area where Dawn of War's graphics fell short was the game's camera system. The camera was fixed at a relatively high angle, making it difficult to see small units or details on the ground, and even when you zoomed in, it wasn't that perfect. Additionally, the camera sometimes had a tendency to get caught on terrain, making it frustrating to navigate in certain spots. Dawn of War's sound design, instead, is one of the highlights of the game alongside the story and the gameplay mechanics. featuring an immersive and dynamic soundtrack with very excellent voice acting, who from my knowledge was done by only one person. The game's music was composed by Jeremy Soule, who is well known for his work on other popular video game soundtracks like the Elder Scrolls series and Guilds of War. The music is epic and atmospheric, capturing the mood of the 40k universe perfectly. The voice acting is also impressive, with each faction having a unique and distinct voice that added to the game's immersion. The game's sound effects were also well done, with each unit having its own distinct sound effect for movement and combat. And even the sound effect for the weapon fire and explosions were quite satisfying, particularly so, and only added more to the visceral feel of the game's combat. But that isn't yet enough. Let's look at what this game left behind. What impact and what legacy did Dawn of War have? Dawn of War had a significant impact on the gaming industry, in a way, and more so though on the Warhammer franchise, in terms of its commercial success and its contribution to the RTS genre. How did it help the Warhammer franchise though? That is the question some may ask, and it's a pretty interesting one. The Warhammer franchise had been a mainstay of tabletop gaming for decades before the release of Dawn of War. However, the game marked a significant shift in the franchise's direction, moving it from tabletop gaming to the digital realm, showing that there is some money to be made right there. The game's success paved the way for subsequent Warhammer video games adaptations, as I've mentioned before, Space Marine, Mechanicus, Gladius, but also some critically acclaimed titles like the Total War Warhammer series. Furthermore, Dawn of War's success also contributed to the expansion of the 40k lore. See, the game introduced new characters, factions, and storylines that have since become part of the franchise. For example, the game's story centers around the Bloodraven's Space Marine chapter, a chapter that you can easily play, and they have their own unique rules, or they had in 8th edition, but nevertheless it was still a fun thing to do, considering that the chapter was invented for the sole purpose of existing in this game alone. Yet its popularity saw the canonization of the chapter and some of the events of the game/games. Because of that, we now have a Gabriel Angelos figure made by Forge World, who I am still yet to buy, but not a fan of resin. Nevertheless, and remember, we have books detailing the events of the game, its expansions, and its sequels. Now, to its impact on the RTS genre in general, Dawn of War's influence was significant in a way. The game introduced several innovations that would become standard features in future RTS games, like the Company of Heroes series that was also created by Relics, but a good modern example is Starship Troopers. For example, other examples. The game's use of the cover mechanic was unique at the time and added a new level of strategic depth to the genre, which was then replicated in Dawn of War 2 to a greater extent. The game's focus on small-scale battles and emphasis on unit customization and leveling up also set it apart from the other RTS games. By level up, I think it means the upgrade system, which often focus on larger scale battles and base building, which is true. Additionally, Dawn of War's success demonstrated the viability of the RTS genre in the digital marketplace. Again, it wasn't the only contribution. Remember, Dawn of War has this distinction of being released in 2004, the moment innovation reached the genre and things started to change and move forward. You could call Dawn of War a pioneer in what would be this current era of RTS games. The game's commercial success encouraged other developers to explore the genre, leading to the creation of several successful RTS franchises. Of course, we can't forget the Starship Trooper game, Company of Heroes, Grey Goo in a way, and you know what? Some would even say StarCraft 2. Even though those claims seem to be stretched to hell and back. In a way, I think the most important legacy Dawn of War left is the legacy left on the minds and hearts of the people that played the game, that got to experience it and its story. The people that got dragged, shall we say, or pushed, shoved, went willingly into the hobby that is Warhammer 40k and have fallen in love with the universe, the lore, and the miniatures in it. The ability to have the units that you used in the game in your own hands, and you get to paint them however you want. Which is also an interesting thing to bring up because the game has this interesting mechanic where you can paint your units. This seems to have been a staple for the Dawn of War games, where you can pick your units to look like any of the factions that are in the game, in the tabletop game. For example, you could pick Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Imperial Fists, Iron Hands, everything down there. And this is a feature that's been with us since the first game until, well, the last. But it is a nice feature that helps you bring that creativity more to light, and it's a good way to explore the hobby and get into it with a little bit of a buffer when you're a first timer. And the story, again, is not too shabby in of itself because it still holds up to this day. There are very few games that can manage to reach the level of storytelling that we have in the Dawn of War game. Of course, this game is only eclipsed in these aspects by Dawn of War 2, who managed to do this 10 times better. But for what Dawn of War did, the first game, and the era that existed and everything that it managed to come up with, it is still a good game that deserves a bunch of praise, and all that legacy it builds now lies into the hands of the people that played it, enjoyed it, who are now reading books and painting models because of it. And I think, in a way, besides the economical point of view that Games Workshop stock went up, of course, I think this speaks more to it. Because while it's not as genre spanning, let's be honest, there are a few games that are really inspired by Dawn of War, besides the ones that I've mentioned already. While it doesn't spawn that, it doesn't inspire the creation of more games like it, it managed to inspire people to enjoy 40k, its atmosphere, and everything around it, which I think is its biggest legacy out there, opening up Warhammer 40k to newer people that didn't know about the game or its existence or its lore until they played this game and found behind it a world filled with wonders. One where you can create your own Space Marine chapters, Chaos Space Marine chapters, your own craft worlds, your own WASs. It's a world filled with marvelous things that can help you and your creativity and explore the universe. And this is the best legacy this game can leave. In general, the Warhammer video games ever left is the fact that they opened the hobby and this world to people that would have never have touched it before. And that's a good thing. Because Warhammer isn't for everyone. Warhammer is for anyone willing to get into it and respect the universe and its lore. And that this game does amazingly. It's a legacy that will last, and it will last even more thanks to its expansions and sequel that only fortify the world that is Dawn of War and the stories told in here. Now, another aspect of its legacy that it's not really its legacy in a way is that it showed Games Workshop that video games can be worth the money because it can bring in players. Now, I don't really say it's part of this game's legacy, mostly because if it was, Games Workshop wouldn't have asked or what do you call it, Warhammer Fantasy before Total War Warhammer came out, which was a pretty dumb move, and self-destructive move, I would even say so. But nevertheless, they've done it, and now we live in an Age of Sigmar world, which I'm not gonna get into. No. This is about Dawn of War, and all the things left behind. Of course, we don't have to forget the Company of Heroes, a franchise that it also spawned thanks to its combat, which basically the combat is pretty similar, except it happens in World War II. Company of Heroes always happens in World War II. But how cool would it have been if it was the First World War? Nevertheless, Dawn of War also spawned the Company of Heroes series, which is another amazing series of RTS games who, funnily enough, also suffer from the third installment in the series being terrible. Funny, but it doesn't matter. It did spawn that series too, which propulsed and made Relic a pretty big player when it comes to the video game genre. It is true, Relic at that point wasn't the big company that we now know, because let's be honest, what did they make before this that really mattered that much? No, I'm just joking around. Don't take it that seriously. They've done amazing work with this game, and unfortunately, yes, I know, I forgot Homeworld, which is a game that many people quite enjoyed, and in its own respect, it's a good RTS game. I'm never gonna say no to that, because that is the truth. But the existence of Company of Heroes and the Dawn of War series is made possible thanks to the first Dawn of War, which also, when you think about it, they are probably some of the last good RTS games that you'll ever find out there. Dawn of War 2 and Company of Heroes 2. Especially if you exclude the Total War series, which, for all intents and purposes, isn't that much grounded into being a real RTS. Some sad and, I guess, nostalgic, but deeply tragic thoughts in, though, is that we might never see an RTS game like Dawn of War. Sure, there's the Starship Trooper game, which I have mentioned like 3 times at this point, but still it looks to be more in love with the Company of Heroes series rather than with Dawn of War, which all props to it, because we know Dawn of War also helped make Company of Heroes. Nevertheless, it doesn't feel the same, also because different IP technically, but the meat and butter, everything that made Dawn of War so accessible, so fun. There might be hints of it in the Starship Trooper game, but they aren't Dawn of War. I don't think there will ever be another game like Dawn of War ever again. Let's not begin with Dawn of War 2. But hopefully one day we will talk also about that. Again, the game holds too much. It reached the exact perfect moment when to be released, in that point where RTSs were starting to innovate, and it came with an innovation that worked and it caught the masses and people loved it and enjoyed it. Couple that with an unknown franchise to more casual players, but one that looked pretty interesting and cool, who happened to be sci-fi at that, helped more with it working the way it did. Now, would Dawn of War have worked if it was, I don't know, Warhammer Fantasy, for example? There is a possibility that it could have worked like that, but still, we are not sure. And to talk about speculations like this, is it really gonna help anybody make that decision if we might ever get another game like it, or one set, into Warhammer Fantasy? Nevertheless, the game offers a little bit of everything, and if you enjoy RTS games and want something different, this game is out here, prepared to give it its all, so people might enjoy it. is a game that, though exploitable as I've mentioned before, with the orcs being able to suppress the unit cap to the point where you need new RAM for that, but nevertheless, it is still enjoyable with its flaws and its many, many strengths. But you don't have to believe me for this. You can test it out yourself. The game is cheap as all hell at this point. The game is so cheap to get, doesn't even matter that much. You have so many variants of it. Game of the Year edition, complete collection, whatever you want to. You can always grab it if you don't have it and play it. Not to talk about key selling sites who also have it on very cheap with the whole expansions to it. I really recommend you get the game if you can with the whole expansions. We'll get to the rest of them, but still the game is amazing in its state, and it is worth every penny you'll ever spend on it. Now, of course, we also have to talk about a little interesting aspect with the game, and that is the modding community that exists for it. As I have mentioned before, for the campaign, you can also install the Fall of Cyrene mod, which lets you play through the Fall of Cyrene and see what disturbed Captain Gabriel Angelo so much that he didn't even want Isidore to speak about it. There are also other mods that help with this, maybe mods that bring new units to the game, new factions, but those mods aren't... How should I say this? They aren't there because there's another game in this series, one expansion to this one, that can very well hold the title as King of Mods, with all the things it can do and how well modded it has been until now. But we'll get there once we get there. Until then, it's important to know that I recommend this game fully. That's why I even write patrician tier on these games, because they are worth every penny you will spend on them. And the hours of enjoyment you will get out of them are more than worth it. Consider it like this: you'll probably get more fun out of this game than probably any other game out there on the market. Modern game, at least. But let's not make this drag for more than it should, because I think this has been enough. With that said, this has been the history, retrospective analysis, whatever you want to call it, of the first Dawn of War game. Again, quite frankly, it's a game that still holds up to this day, despite its limitations and flaws. It brought some innovation right at the perfect moment. And, the future ahead looks bright. I really recommend playing this game. It's a classic with good gameplay and a good story, as I've said before. Now, this game can say it stands with the best in the genre, alongside others like Warcraft 3, Age of Mythology, its second expansion and third one with mods, and sequel, and a few other games. With such inspiration and, bright gameplay and story, clearly following titles and games will follow into the footsteps of those that came before them and bring to light masterpieces of the same caliber, or even better. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless lakes of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.